Today we're going to talk about the bridges in our lives. And I know I was probably taught this back in music classes, but I don't know, I think you forget sometimes what's going on. But I was reminded of it one Sunday when Pastor Jez over there was talking to the band and talking about the bridge in a song and how they were going to transition into it. And I thought, yeah, I've been taught that before, about there's bridges in songs. And besides the idea that there's this connection to music in the word bridge, the online Webster's Dictionary gives us 16 definitions for bridge. Perhaps some of them you might even be able to guess with me, but I'm going to give you a head start here. Number one is a structure carrying a pathway or roadway over a depression or obstacle, a time, place, or means of connection or transition. Anybody else got one that they want to say? A definition of bridge? Now use your little brains. Oh, your teeth. That's right. Your teeth is one. Anybody else? Something resembling a bridge in a form or function, such as the upper bony part of your nose. And for those of you that wear glasses, and Darrell, come on now. He's the optometry man back there for Milan Optometry. You should know that one. Come on. It's a bridge on your pair of glasses. A piece raising the strings of a musical instrument, jazz. The bridge of a guitar. The forward part of a ship's superstructure from which the ship is navigated, the bridge. The gantry, now this is a hard one. I didn't know this and I had to look it up. But it's the frame like this for holding barrels. Interesting, huh? The hands as a rest for billiards or pool cue, and a device used as a cue rest. All of those are bridge. Then we also have a musical passage linking two sections of a composition, which I've already spoke about. A partial denture, yep, Mindy got that one right, ding ding. A connection as an atom or group of atoms that joins two different parts of a molecule as opposite sides of a ring. No, that one was clear up here. Didn't even think about that one. Yeah, but it was interesting. This one too. An electrical instrument or network for measuring or comparing resistances, inductances, capacitors. Yeah, you got it. Comparing the ratio of two opposing voltages to a known ratio. Again, up here. So, of course, there is the card game bridge. A lot of you should have gotten that one right. And as we had on Saturday for yoga, there's a yoga pose called the bridge, right? Okay. And as much as all of those are interesting, what we're going to focus on today is a time, place, or means of connection or transition. That's the kind of bridge we're going to look at today. But before we get busy and jump into this all the way, we have to say our statements of truth. So I invite you to say them together with me. I am a child of God. I am deserving of good in my life. I am accepting my good now. Thank you. So I have a few questions for us to ponder to begin with. And here they are. How many bridges have we encountered over our lifetime? What bridges have we chosen to cross or not? And what kind of bridges have we built or torn down? I put this one on here because I was looking for a picture of Spaghetti Junction, you know, that place where that's just crazy. But that reminded me of it. So kind of the chaos that we end up in sometimes. And these are great questions to reflect upon, to see what shows up for each of us. But today we're just going to look into what the possible answers might be for these questions and how they affect our spiritual lives. Now, one thing I want to point out about these questions, because if you're having a little bit of difficulty thinking about the bridges in your lives, you can change the word bridge to connection or transition. So, for example, how many connections or transitions have we encountered over our lifetime? And that's what we're going to start with. Let's make it easy on ourselves and think about the time from birth until now. You know, we began with our birth and we began to gain some independence and we started forming our personalities. And we began to understand the idea of choices, didn't we? You know, when we reached for the hot stove and our parents said no, no, and we did it anyway and we got burned. Yeah, we started figuring out that these choices have consequences in our lives. But soon we learned the impact even more of those choices because we became teenagers. And that's a whole nother thing, isn't it? Yeah, because we got these outside influences. We had peer pressure. And we could have a total freedom at times, which could totally alter our lives and what was going to happen from that point on. Our lives kind of came at us in a flash, and we had these choices to make, and sometimes we didn't make the best choices, did we? Our parents, of course, enforced the consequences by grounding us or by being disappointed in us, which that could lead to a heavy heart feeling. And they also would get angry with us if we made the wrong choice, too, and that could be hard. But we began to get this sense of understanding, but it was twisted by our own desires that we wanted to go out and have fun, or at least experience some fun. Now, it didn't always work for our highest good, though, did it? No. We made these choices and we thought, oh, it's party time, let's go have a good time, and then something down the road clicked in and we were like in this mess somewhere. Well, that totally happened to me when I was in high school, and I went to a football game, but I was going to spend the night with my girlfriend. And of course, this was, I was new to this group of kids, and this girl had moved into my neighborhood, and she was the only girl my age that I could hang out with. And so we went to the football game. She said, oh, we're going to go to this party after the football game. And I was like, okay, sounds like fun. So we go to the party, and of course, she starts drinking. Well, I had never drank in my life, and so I, tasted the Boone Farm wine. Anybody ever? Come on, raise your hand. I know you've been there. Yeah. And of course, I realized that I didn't like the taste of it, especially, but after it came back up, I thought this is not what I want to do with my life, and so I decided I wasn't going to go to any more parties with her. Now, this was very difficult, being the only kid in my neighborhood that I could hang out with. And yet I had to break that connection because I knew it wasn't going to serve my highest good. I knew I wasn't going to end up in a good place if I continued to go with her to these parties while she got all crazy and drunk. So I made the decision in high school that this was not for my highest good, even though I didn't know what the highest good was. I still knew at that time that this was not good. And you know what? Even when we go to reunions now, there's still this strange connection between us because I didn't go along with what she wanted me to do. And yet I have to remember that everything prior to that one Friday night, we had some fun times and we had some good times. So I remember that and try to focus on that in our relationships, because those fond memories that we create and build can be the bridge that gets us beyond those bridges that we have to disconnect with. Does that make sense? Yeah. But, when we're going through those struggling teen years, we finally become a young adult and we think we're ready to conquer the world, and we begin to go to college or we get a job and we start working and we really start feeling true independence, don't we? Because we get to make a lot of decisions, or almost all our decisions, for our own self. And then we just feel so empowered, don't we? We're in our 20s or, late teens, and we think, oh, we can just do whatever we want to do and we are the one, and no, we don't have to listen to anybody. But then the small R reality sinks in, doesn't it? Because what happens is we have to pay for books, we have to pay the bills, we have to pay for gas for our car, we probably have to pay for the insurance, we have and then, there's food too that we have to look at. And all these things start falling into place and we think, hey, maybe that bridge we had with our parents might be a bridge we don't want to disconnect from. That we want to keep that connection with that bridge because it's going to serve us and serve our highest good. And even though it's hard to do when you're in that position, it's hard to come back and try to build that bridge back. If you've disconnected that bridge, you still want to do it because you know it's going to be best for you. Of course, then there's our friends and our with their influences and desires. And at this point in our lives, we might not have learned quite how to make our own decisions or how to go about our life without being manipulated. And the bad thing about that is when we start becoming manipulated, it could end up in abuse. We could end up in a terrible relationship or marriage even, or living with someone even that is abusive. And that is hard to get back out of. But again, that's a bridge we need to disconnect in order to come back to our highest good. And yet it's not always the most easiest thing to do. But at this point, our lives have fast forwarded to this now moment because we are here, and we have to decide what we want to truly be. We have to answer the question for ourselves, what is it that we want to do, and who do we want to be, and what do we want to express? Well, Eckhart Tolle gives us this advice from his text, The New Earth. He says, the next step in human evolution is not inevitable, but for the first time in the history of our planet, it can be a conscious choice. And who is making the choices? You are. And who are you? Consciousness that has become conscious of itself. And this is what happens when we begin to turn on to that spiritual identity that we call that I am. That spiritual place within us, that longing in our soul that wants to express. That's what happens in that moment. We become aware of that consciousness. We have that desire that we want something more in our lives. And when we come on to that, when we are aware of that, then we are making that spiritual connection, and we're making that spiritual bridge into that idea of oneness with God. Now, we explore through the world our friendships and activities, and we try to discern what is our highest good, but it doesn't always work out all that way. But when we were kids, we might have relied on the Ouija board, or that, the 8 ball that we turned over and said, does he love me? And it might say yes, or it might say no, not now. We did those kind of things. And we've come to a point in life where we can't use those tools anymore, can we? We have to really go within. And that's where opening up that spiritual connection can help us. Because when we go within with those questions, we can find the answers. We can truly find the answers that are going to serve our highest good, that are going to be the best for us. And we can do that right here, right now, in every single moment and every single breath of our lives. All we have to do is take a moment. But when we get into that idea of thinking that our parents grounding us, or that we're going to have to go to time out, which happened to us when we were kids, it's not going to happen anymore. It's not going to happen because we now govern what we think and what we do. And yet, on the opposite side of that idea of breaking those bridges, we can also learn this. We can learn that we can begin to discover that if we break bridges, we can also build them. And we come to that, don't we? We come to that through that spiritual connection. We come to that through those life experiences. We come to that through those things that we no longer want to even think about in our lives. Like, we know they're there. They seem like a different person was in that time frame. It wasn't us. It wasn't the true essence of who we are. And yet something happened in that time frame that we know happened. And yet we don't have to stay focused on that. We can begin to build a new bridge that's going to serve us. And we can build those transitions so easily by beholding the Christ within ourselves and by beholding the Christ within another. And that's the beauty behind the bridges in our lives. Well, I made an acronym for BRIDGE, and it is being receptive in divinely grafting evolution. And so we're going to look at individual for a minute here, though. The individual or individuality in each of us, according to the Revealing Word, which is like a dictionary, a metaphysical dictionary for words. It says, the true self, that which is undivided from God, our spiritual identity, the God part of us. And if you were here a few weeks ago, you know I was talking about mind, body, spirit and how that all relates. It's the same kind of concept. It's another synonym for that God part of us, okay? So here it is. Beings equals individuals, and we just gave you the definition of individuals. Receptive equals interested or approachable. In means within us. Divinely, beautifully, delightfully, grafting, joining, splicing. That's where we go back and take those bridges, and we're going to splice our lives back together and form a stronger bridge. Because, you know, if something's like this and you've built it, sometimes it's just like a broken bone. When you break a bone and you come back together and those bones graft together, they're actually stronger in that graft than the bone ever was before. It's the same thing when we build bridges. Evolution, development, or fruition. And why do we want to alter the consciousness in which we are currently living from? Well, I have to backtrack a minute, because what I'm saying here is when we tune into that God part of us, we are interested in turning within to delightfully join our development of our life to expressing a consciousness of good. In other words, we don't just focus on the idea that there is going to be good from the outcome, which we've all experienced, right? From those past places we've been in our life. We know that if we hadn't have been there, we wouldn't have received the good that came from that later, right? It's the same thing. We know that, but at the same time, we can also look at it and alter the consciousness, that idea of where we are at right now, that idea of where we're living from that outcome before. We can alter that in our own consciousness to realize that we are in this now moment, and from here on out, everything is going to serve our highest good. That experience might have ended up being a blessing, and we no longer, well, I'm sure it was a blessing. Whatever that experience was, we know that there was good eventually that came from that. And whatever that good is, that's what we want to focus on. That's what we want to alter our consciousness around, because we don't want to dwell on something that was. We want to dwell on something that is right now, that is expressing through us. Does that make sense? Yes. So that is why we want to alter the consciousness in which we are currently living from. We want to be in that expression of God's good in and through us. We want to be that expression of the Most High. We want to do this all the time, not just part of the time, not just when you're here on Sundays or you leave and you're good for a couple hours and then something happens and no longer are we from that place. Or Wednesday comes and we're thinking, why is this week dragging on so long, blah, blah. Warren loves that commercial with the camel for hump day. It's hump day! He goes around like this on Wednesdays now, acting like the camel. But you know, it can be one of those moments where we're sitting there like dreading the next moment. We don't have to do that. We can switch our consciousness in that moment. We can do it all the time. So you might be saying to me right now, I can't do that all the time. I can't live from that place of that higher consciousness or that idea that God is with me all the time and every thought I have and every word I say and every action I have is going to be for the highest good. I can't live from that. Yeah, you can. First off, we have to cross out those words, don't we? We have to cross out the I can't, because we know, say it with me, thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. Yes, very good. And you might be saying, Reverend Francie, if every thought we get is from God, then how do our thoughts get distorted to the idea of I can't, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not, whatever your blank is, fill it in. You know what you say to yourselves, I don't. Well, it's our ego. Now, before you get into beating yourself up about the ego, know that there are two sides to an ego. There's night and day, right? There's cold and hot. Well, there's the adverse ego and the spiritual ego, believe it or not. And we're going to see Fillmore's definitions on that right now. The ego itself is the I. The ego is man or woman, and by reason of his divinity, he makes and remakes as he wills. In this lie his greatest strength and his greatest weakness. The ego of itself is possessed of nothing. It is a mere ignorant child of innocence, floating in the mind of being. But through the doors of its consciousness must pass all the treasures of God. So everything that we get comes through, and it actually, if you could think of the ego as almost like a screen or a sister, you know, and it all comes through. And then we decide whether we're going to go to this place, which is the adverse ego, which is when the ego attaches itself to sense consciousness. It builds the Antichrist man, who has no basis in small r reality. This is known as the adverse ego. It is the adverse ego that causes all the trouble in the world. Its selfishness and greed make men grovel in the mire of materiality when they might soar in the heavens of spirituality. I love that last statement, where they might soar in the heavens of spirituality. So we decide whether we're going to soar or whether we're going to just grovel in materiality. We decide. And then we're going to look at spiritual ego. The spiritual ego is the true self, and individualized. Remember, we're going back to that idea of individual, like I gave you the definition. I used it in beings, the same as beings. Center of God consciousness, the I am, the conscious identity or oneness with God. And when we are born, we have this ego that is lying dormant within us. And we begin to experience life, and our ego can become inflated if we take in the attention of others into our self-awareness as selfishness, like that attention that somebody's giving us is just for us. It's not for the whole. It's just all about me, and you guys need to start patting me on the back every day of my life so that I can feel good about me. Anybody ever been around anybody like that or been there before? You know, just like you're almost like, you know, begging for that compliment. Yeah. Well, we've all probably been there at some time or another. But that's where the adverse ego is playing in. But you see, if we look at babies, you know, I love to look at babies. And if you look at babies who are loved and held and coddled through that energy of God's powerful love that everyone around them wants to share with them, then these babies grow up to be healthy and strong and vibrant human beings because they have gotten the pure love of God in that moment that you looked at them and held them and knew that they were that essence of pure spirit. The babies who aren't held or loved or coddled become desperate for attention, and their egos cry out for that love, and that's where the adverse ego starts coming into play. Even as a baby, it's longing for that attention that is normally given to babies freely and easily. And then what happens? These people begin to grow up. Now, at any moment, though, we can all change. We don't have to stay in that place of the adverse ego, do we? We can build that bridge that takes us back to that place of spiritual ego, where we find that balance in our lives. Now, perhaps some of you have experienced, let me see where I'm at. Some of you might have experienced this when you were not babies. Some of you might have experienced it in a relationship with someone. You know, you felt like you weren't loved enough in that relationship. You felt less than. Maybe it goes back to the idea that you were in a relationship that was abusive and the person never respected you or gave you your space or treated you like you were a spirit of God moving in and through you. You felt that rejection of love, of God's pure love. You felt it, and it hurt. And it broke that bridge, and it allowed that adverse ego to come forth because now you felt like you needed to protect yourself. Perhaps you were in school, and you were playing on the playground with some of your friends, having a good old time. And somebody comes up to you and says, I don't want to play with you anymore. I'm not your friend. And then the next person says the same thing to you, and the next person says the same thing. And you felt hurt, and you felt rejected. And again, the pure love was no longer there. Maybe that made your adverse ego come out. Maybe it was because of divorce or adultery. Maybe it was because of someone just breaking the cord between your relationship too quickly, and you didn't feel that love anymore. All of those things could break that bridge, can tear down that bridge. But whenever there's been a time in our life that love was withheld, we can rebuild that bridge with love by loving ourselves, by taking power and control over the love that is given to us by turning within to that Christ presence and loving ourselves. No matter what has happened in our life, no matter what tragedy, we can repair the bridge. And we can release whatever that was that happened out here in our lives. We can release it with love. We can allow that not to be the catalyst that shapes the rest of our lives. We can release it and let it go through the power of love. We can mend our hearts and our souls and our bodies through love. And when we do this, we will be able to stand in the middle of our bridge and withstand all things. Because love is stronger than anything. It will align our ego so that our spiritual ego, the I am of us, will be ready to soar in the heavens of spirituality. I have one more quote from Eckhart Tolle. If you can be absolutely comfortable with knowing who you are, then what's left is who you are. The being behind the human. A field of pure potentiality rather than something that is already defined. Give up defining yourself to yourself and others. You won't die. You will begin to live You will come to life. We will strive. We strive every day to be that beingness of God. We stand on the bridge of life ready to claim this spiritual beingness that is us, that we call us, whatever you call yourself. We are here, ready to go. And when we do this, then we are ready to experience life as beings receptive in divinely grafting evolution, and at the same time being beings receptive in divinely guiding our ego. Thank you for being here today. God bless you.
When you're weary, feeling small, when tears are in your eyes, I will dry them all. I'm on your side. When times get rough, your friends just can't be found. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. When you're down and out, when you're on the street, when evening falls so hard, I will come for you. I'll take your part. When darkness comes